Picture your API as a tiny coffee shop. One person walks in, "Can I get a latte?" Fine. Next person, "Can I get a latte?" Also fine. Then some guy kicks the door open with 400 laptops duct taped to his chest and yells, "I'd like 900,000 lattes per second." That's rate limiting in a nutshell. Or rather, that's why rate limiting exists. By the end of this video, you'll know what it actually is, why every real backend needs it, how developers work around it when building web scrapers, the main strategies people use, and how to do it without blocking your actual users while laptop guy keeps trying. So first, what is it? Rate limiting is a rule that says you can only do this many requests in this amount of time. 100 requests per minute, 5 login attempts every 50 minutes, 1,000 API calls a day, and after that you start paying us because it turns out servers aren't free. That's the whole idea. You're protecting your system from getting overwhelmed by one user, one IP, one API key, one account going way too hard. Now, rate limiting isn't only about stopping evil traffic. Sometimes it's just people. Someone refreshes a page 87 times because the button looked stuck. A front-end bug fires the same request in a loop. Your mobile app retries a failed call every 0.2 seconds until your backend starts drafting a resignation letter. Here's the mental model on the backend side. A request comes in. The server asks, "Who is this?" Then, "How many requests has this identity made recently?" Then it decides allow or reject. If it allows a request, business as usual. If it rejects it, you'll usually see HTTP status 429, too many requests, which is basically your API saying, "Hydrate, take a walk, try again later." That retry after header tells the client when to come back. Good clients actually respect it and back off, instead of slamming into the wall over and over like a Roomba with a grudge. Okay, so who do we actually limit? Easiest option, IP address, something like this. Simple but not perfect. A school, office, or coffee shop can have dozens of people behind one IP. So one person spams the login page and now everyone on that network's getting punished. A better option, if the user is logged in, is to use their user ID since it's more accurate. For API, you typically identify requests by the API key. For login attempts, it's usually best to combine multiple signals, like the IP address, username, device, and behavior patterns, rather than relying on just one. Now let's look at the different rate limiting strategies. There are 4 common ones, and we'll start with the simplest, the fixed window. It's easy to visualize. You pick a time window, say 1 minute, and count how many requests come in during that minute. So if your limit is 100 requests per minute, every request increases the counter by 1. Once you hit 100, any additional requests are blocked until the minute is over. Then, when the clock rolls over to the next minute, the counter resets to 0 and the process starts again. It sounds simple, right? Almost too simple. And that's usually a sign there's a catch. The catch happens right at the moment one time window ends and the next one begins. Imagine someone sends 100 requests in the last second of the current minute. Then, as soon as the next minute starts, they send another 100. Technically, neither minute broke the limit, so every request is allowed through. But from your server's perspective, it just handled 200 requests almost back to back. That's not much of a rate limit. It's more like a sudden traffic spike that slipped through the rules. Next is the sliding window. Instead of counting requests in a fixed calendar minute, it counts how many happened in the last 60 seconds, no matter when you check. Since a window is always moving, that boundary problem disappears. The downside is that it's more expensive. You have to keep track of request timestamps or use a smarter approximation. So it's more accurate and fair, but also more work to build and run. And honestly, that trade-off pretty much sums up backend engineering. Simple and good enough, or accurate and more complex. Third is the token bucket. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Imagine everyone has a bucket that slowly fills with tokens over time. Every request spends 1 token. If you have a token, the request goes through. If the bucket is empty, it gets blocked. For example, if the bucket holds 10 tokens and refills 1 token every second, you can make 10 requests all at once. After that, you're limited by how fast new tokens arrive. This works really well because real users don't make perfectly spaced out requests. They load a page, click a few buttons, and interact in bursts. The token bucket handles those short bursts without penalizing normal behavior. Finally, there's the leaky bucket. Requests go into a bucket and they come out at a steady, fixed rate, no matter how quickly they arrive. If too many requests come in at once, the bucket overflows and the extras get dropped or delayed. While the token bucket allows short bursts of traffic, the leaky bucket keeps everything moving at a consistent pace. Different approach, same goal, keeping the load smooth and predictable. Alright, enough theory. Let's try to build a simple one in Express. This isn't production ready. We're skipping things like Redis and distributed servers. The goal is just to see how it works. We'll start with the simplest possible route. Right now, we have a get route that listens for a request on /API/data. When a request comes in, we'll handle it and add our rate limiting logic step by step. Let's start by sending a simple response. When someone makes a request to this route, we'll just send back this. Now our route actually responds, but there's still one problem. Nothing stops someone from calling it over and over again. If one client sends thousands of requests, our server will happily keep processing them. So the first thing we need is a way to remember who's making requests. We'll use a simple object where the key is the client's IP address and the value is the data we're tracking. Inside the root, we can get the IP with request.ip. At this point, we're not limiting anything yet. We're just identifying who's making the request. Next, let's start counting. Every time that IP makes a request, we increase its counter. If it's the first time we've seen that IP, we initialize the count first. We're still not blocking anything yet. We're just keeping track of the traffic. Now, let's add a limit. Say we allow 5 requests per IP. Once the count goes over 5, we return a 429. That return is important. Without it, Express will keep running the rest of the route and try to send another response, which throws an error. There's one big problem though. Once someone reaches 5 requests, they're blocked forever. The counter never resets. That's not really rate limiting, it's just permanent punishment. To fix that, we need a time window. Instead of storing just a count, we'll store 2 things for each IP, the request count and the time when the current window started. Now, every request checks whether the current time window has expired. If it has, we reset the counter and start a new window. Otherwise, we increment the count like before. And that's a simple, fixed window rate limiter. Every request follows the same flow. Identify the client, check whether their window has expired, update the count, and either allow the request or return a 429. That's the core idea behind rate limiting. Now that we know how to create a rate limiter, let's learn how to legally work around one of the biggest problems developers run into when scraping websites. As developers, we often need data from other websites, but if we send hundreds or thousands of requests from the same IP address, we'll eventually hit rate limits or get temporarily blocked. That's where rotating residential proxies come in. They automatically rotate your requests across real residential IP addresses, helping your scraper avoid rate limits and IP bans while collecting data at scale. We'll be using DataImpulse residential proxy network to solve this exact problem. If you'd like to follow along, you can sign up using the link in the description below and try everything we're building in this video yourself. To demonstrate this, I created a simple online store website with rate limiting enabled. Once the same IP address sends too many requests within a short period, the server responds with a 429. Our goal is to scrape the products from this website. At first, everything will work normally, but after enough requests, we'll eventually get blocked because every request is coming from the same IP address. Let's build a simple scraper. Nothing fancy, just enough to see the problem. We'll use Axios to send requests. Next, let's create a function that fetches our products page. This line sends a GET request to the website. If it succeeds, we'll get a 200 status code. Now, one request isn't enough to trigger a rate limit. Websites usually block you after receiving lots of requests from the same IP. So instead of calling it once, let's call it 200 times. At first, everything works, but eventually we start seeing this. To make that easier to see, let's add some basic error handling. Now, if the website starts rate limiting us, we'll actually see it. Nothing about our code is wrong. The website simply doesn't want hundreds of requests coming from the exact same IP address. This is exactly the situation developers run into when building web scrapers. So how do developers solve this in production? Instead of every request coming from our IP address, we'll route them through DataImpulse residential proxy network. The nice thing is that we barely have to change our code. First, let's create an Axios instance instead of calling Axios directly. Think of an Axios instance as a reusable client. We configure it once, then reuse it for every request. Now, let's tell Axios to use DataImpulse proxy. The host is a DataImpulse proxy server we're connecting to, while the port tells Axios which network port to communicate through. Finally, we authenticate using the username and password from our DataImpulse dashboard. I'm storing them in environment variables so we don't accidentally expose our credentials in the source code or upload them to GitHub. Now, the only thing left is to replace this line. With this, our finished scraper now looks like this. Notice how almost nothing changed. We're still scraping the exact same website. The only difference is how the request reaches that website. Instead of repeatedly sending requests from our own IP address, they're routed through DataImpulse residential proxy network. That dramatically reduces the chances of your scraper getting blocked simply because you're making a lot of legitimate requests from one location. The result is exactly what we wanted. Our scraper continues running instead of 429 after a short while. That's why rotating residential proxies are one of the first tools developers reach for when they start building production web scrapers. They let you scale your scraping infrastructure with almost no changes to your application code. Today, we learned how to protect our own API with rate limiting and how to build web scrapers that can scale using DataImpulse residential proxies. If you want to try DataImpulse yourself, you can sign up using the link in the description. They offer over 90 million residential IPs across 195 countries, making it easy to access geo-targeted data from almost anywhere in the world. Setup is simple. Pricing is pay-as-you-go, starting at just $1 per gigabyte. Your traffic never expires, and you can get started with just a $5 minimum deposit. Plus, they offer 24/7 support, making DataImpulse a great option whether you're building your first scraper or running production workloads. Before you go, if you want to remember everything we covered today, we've put together a free rate limiting cheat sheet that you can download using the link below. And if you want more educational content like this, join our free developer newsletter and Discord community where you can learn alongside thousands of other developers. That's it for this video. This is Jason. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.